Dr. Ava Muhammad returns to Milwaukee. Coming here on Saturday, November 8th at 3 p.m. at the Wisconsin African American Women's Center, 3020 West Belize. Her subject is Justifiable Homicide, the Ultimate Solution for Justice.
They will rehabilitate and elevate a criminal in your face and take a young, educated, aspiring, beautiful black boy and make him a criminal in your face.
White America has declared open season on the black men and boys. Darius Simmons, Derek Williams, Corey Stingley, Dontre Hamilton, and Trayvon Martin are just the tip of the iceberg.
We've got to start pooling our resources, not only our money, but our mind and our heart towards self-interest.
Following Dr. Ava Muhammad's message, there will be a panel discussion on the solutions for justice. For more information, call 414-755-2006.
Hello, I am Redonna Rogers, Executive Director and co-founder of the Center for Teaching Entrepreneurship. I am extremely proud that we are celebrating our 23rd anniversary Harvest of Hope on Thursday, November 20th at the Italian Community Center, starting at 5:30 p.m. There will be a silent auction, dinner, program, and entertainment. This year, our keynote speaker will be Darius Quarles, an award-winning entrepreneur and globally recognized social change maker, a sought-after speaker in the area of scholarship education and youth empowerment, and founder of the $1 Million Scholar. To make your reservation, go to www.ceoofme.biz and click on the Harvest of Hope button. This is an event you can't afford to miss. That's our 23rd anniversary Harvest of Hope, Thursday, November 20th at the ICC. For reservations, go to www.ceoofme.biz or call 414-263-1833.
The East African tradition of the Maasai tribe is to greet one another with the words Kasirian Ngera, which is Swahili for, so how are the children? In that community, the well-being of their children is the highest priority. If you are interested in participating in thought-provoking conversations about the well-being of children and families, please tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. to Fresh Start Today on 860 AM WNOV. Together, we can save our children.
Good afternoon. You are tuned in to Fresh Start Today. I am your host, Jermaine Reed, and in the studio I have with me Dr. Ramel Smith. He's a psychologist in the Milwaukee area. And on the phone line, we have a very special guest, Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, who is a national educational consultant. He has spoken in most urban school districts in the country, or have consulted with most urban school districts in the country. He has authored over 30 books, including Raising Black Boys, Keeping Black Boys Out of Special Education, The State of Emergency, We Must Save African American Males, Black Students, Middle Class Teachers, Black Economics, just a plethora of books that he has written addressing the plight of black children and families in America. His work has been featured in Ebony and Essence magazine, as well as he was a guest on The State of the Black America with Tavis Smiley, BET, and Oprah. He is also frequent guest on the Michael Baisden show, and we are pleased to have Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu online with us today to talk about the black male child. Is special education ruining black boys? Unfortunately, you will not be able to call in to this particular show, but if you have any questions or you have any comments, you can tweet us at Fresh Start 860. Tweet us at Fresh Start 860, or you can email your comments or questions to freshstart860@gmail.com. Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, are you there?
How are you, Jermaine, and how are you, Ramel?
Hey, pretty good. How's it going, sir?
Good to hear your voice.
Well, we are very honored to have you be our guest on the show, and you have to be one of the foremost authorities on educating black boys in the country. And your work is respected, and we just want to say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. We know that you are a proud husband, father, grandfather, and there's so many people that benefit from the work that you've done. And so for you to take time out of your schedule to talk to us over here in Milwaukee, we are very pleased. So again, thank you.
Well, thank you. And I understand that the work that you're doing in Milwaukee, I mean, when we talk about it takes a village, the work that you're doing at Fresh Start, our city is much better off because of the work that you're doing, Jermaine.
Well, thanks a lot, and I appreciate that. You talk about the village a lot, and in a conversation we previously had, you were talking about how that there's a certain percentage of African American children that are born to single parents, and then you talk about the balance of the folk who are born to two-parented homes is very small compared to those who are born in single-parent homes. And you had raised a question the other day about whether or not the village is able to support the number of children who are not raised in a two-parented home. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's been frustrating for me because when I first wrote Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, Volume 1, that was in 1982. So now we're looking at 32 years later, and there's been 4 volumes, and there have been other books written by me and other authors, and the work that Ramel was doing. So and the work that you're doing. A lot of us have made contributions over the past 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 years to improve the plight for African American males and girls. The challenge, as you mentioned, Jermaine, is that only 28% of our children, and that figure's been declining each and every year, only 28% of our children have their fathers in the home. So the million-dollar question becomes, if 72% of our children are being reared in a single-parent home, is the village strong enough? In other words, is Fresh Start, 100 Black Men, urban prep, mentoring programs, rites of passage programs, all the great things that are being done in Milwaukee and around the country, is it strong enough to raise the 72% of our children who lack a father in the home?
Wow. Now, you have written about, how many books have you written, Dr. Kunjufu?
I think it's 37. And Jermaine, one of the things I'm really proud of, and I'll send this to you later on, is that my 2 latest books now are on girls. One is already released, Educating Black Girls.
Okay.
And in December, we're going to be releasing Raising Black Girls, because I've been criticized over my 40-year career. When am I going to say anything about our girls? And for years, what I've done is ask my staff and writers and editors on my staff to write books on girls, and they've done that. But I finally decided that I wanted to address this issue as well. For example, while it's true that 24% of black boys are suspended, it's not much better for the girls at 12%.
Right. So, and that was the next question I was going to ask you, Dr. Kunjufu, is that, over the years you've done countless of interviews and you've written a number of books about black children, but your focus has primarily been on black boys. And I wanted to ask you, why is that?
Well, if you live in a world controlled by white male supremacy, then the greatest threat to white males, to white male supremacy, would be from other men.
Okay.
And the men with the most color pose the greatest threat. And the best way to destroy a black man is to destroy him as a boy. And one of the most effective ways to do that is to fail him in kindergarten. I don't know if you're aware of this, Jermaine, but in Milwaukee, there are black boys who are failing kindergarten.
Yes.
Secondly, if you don't teach them how to read in kindergarten, then the second thing you do is retain them. And 29% of black boys nationwide fail a grade and are retained. The third way is to place them in special education.
Okay.
Where literally Milwaukee public schools and American public schools, they become the biggest drug dealer in America. There are 7 million children who receive Ritalin on a daily basis in America.
7 million.
7 million. So between failing kindergarten, being retained, placed in special education, being suspended, which means and constitutes missing large numbers of days of school, dropping out, that's why you hear this term, the school-to-prison pipeline.
Right. We want to talk a little bit about that school-to-prison pipeline a little bit later in the program. But in your classic series, Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, I want to ask you the question. I mean, you've been doing this now for a generation.
Yes,
Talking,
since 1982.
Since 1982, it's been a while, and you've seen a
Well,
lot.
actually, I'm sorry. That's when I started writing. My career began in '74, so this is now my 40th year.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we share something in common. This is my 40th year being here, too. So,
No, it isn't, Jermaine.
Yes, it is. but let me ask you about this conspiracy. Have you seen any changes with the conspiracy? Is there a real conspiracy today in 2014, 40 years later since you've started your career, against or a conspiracy to destroy the black boy in America?
Well, see, I think what the media and what the public wants to do is to bait me into this discussion about this provocative term, conspiracy.
Okay.
What I'd rather do is to ask Milwaukee public school teachers, for example, when I speak in Milwaukee, and let's say it's an integrated school, and let's say it's equal 50% white, 50% black. So then the first question I ask the principal, are 50% of your students who are in special education African American? Are 50% of your AP, gifted and talented, honor students African American?
Right.
And if they begin to give me numbers, for example, if 50% of the students are African American, which means 25% are African American male, if they tell me that 50% or more of their special ed students are African American male, then whether we want to call that a conspiracy, an irony, something very interesting, we need to look into this. Why is it that a disproportionate percentage of black youth and black male youth are placed in special ed, remedial reading, and lower track classes?
Right.
Is that an accident?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, just talking about the span of your career, I'm reminded of the landmark case of Larry P. versus Rouse in California. And this is basically where they were disproportionately placing young African-American male in what they call EMR, educationally mentally retarded classes, educational mentally retarded classes back then. And it was founded that it was against the law for them to try to do it with the IQ tests that they were doing. But those same IQ tests they're still doing today. So when we talk about a conspiracy, whether you want to call it whatever you want from that terms, we have to see that it is some type of engineering that's done to destroy. From 1900 to 1970, the prison population in America stayed pretty static at about 250 to 270,000 people. From 1970 now to 2014, we have well over 2 million people in prisons, in federal, state, local jails, things of that nature. And then if we add probation and parole, it goes up almost to 3 million. So when you think about a way to address the point you said initially, how do we keep that one source down from white supremacy, male supremacy specifically? Well, we look at it from after the Emancipation Proclamation. Well, what happened when they saw how progressive that African Americans were as far as trying to learn how to read, to vote, all of the things that they were doing? That's when Plessy versus Ferguson came into act. So it was always something there to kind of stop you as far as from getting everything that you wanted to do. And I think the same things off the heels of the civil rights movement, you saw a great movement going on where you said, hey, you know what? People are coming together. It's a collection of the society, bringing that village, not just a village, but a responsible village to raise responsible people. And I think that was part of the demagogue politics that went into the fear tactics that got that prison population up, which was a way, whether you want to call it the prison industrial complex, the new slavery, what you have, another way to down that population that could pose a threat to the power that be.
Which is that the black male, or is that you're talking about the black race?
Well, I think what Ramel was describing, he did an excellent job. That's the black race. I just want to quickly mention that when I work with schools in Milwaukee, and I ask them, so what percent of black males are in special ed or remedial reading? Let's then juxtapose that with what percent of white girls are placed in special education.
Right.
So I don't think it's an accident that white girls are placed in special ed the least.
Yes.
And African-American males the greatest, nor do I think it's an accident that one reason why white girls are placed in special ed the least is because 83% of America's elementary school teachers are white female.
So with that being said, if 83% of the K through 12 teacher workforce.
Primarily elementary school teachers.
I'm sorry, elementary is 83%. And I think somewhere around 80% of the referrals that are made to special education are made by white teachers.
Let's pause there again.
Sure.
20% of the teachers
make 80%.
Make 80% of the referrals to special ed.
Okay, so 20%.
Which means, Jermaine, if you were a principal and you knew that 20% of your staff are making 80% of the referrals,
correct.
Rather than placing black boys in special ed, you need to bring someone like myself or Dr. Smith in to provide a workshop for that 20% that's trigger happy.
So is the future of the black male child in the hands of that 20%, whether that's 20% white female teachers, 20% white teachers that are making these referrals? Where's the future of the black male child, especially from an educational standpoint?
Well, let me say this. To answer your question succinctly, it would be yes. But I just want to digress and say,
sure.
Is the future of the black race in the hands of white female teachers, because we may be the only race asking someone else to educate our children. When Dr. Smith was describing the history of what's been going on for African American people and children, as he pointed out with regards, for example, with Brown versus Topeka, since 1954, there's been a 66% decline in African American teachers. And so right now, we're 6% of the teachers, and African American males are 1%. So it's very possible in Milwaukee for a black boy to go K3, K6, maybe K8, and never experience a black male teacher.
Wow.
That would have been unheard of before 1954.
Wow. In one of your books, Dr. Kunjufu, you had mentioned that the IEP meeting is the most important meeting in the life of, I'm not sure if it said the black child or the black male, but can you
talk? The
black child. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, so it's the individualized educational plan.
Right.
And my first problem with the meeting is that it's scheduled normally during the school day, which means the parent, in most cases, the mother, has to miss work to attend the meeting.
Okay.
Now, the meeting is scheduled for 12 o'clock on Wednesday. 5 people arrived at 11:30. The principal, the psychologist, the social worker, the special ed coordinator, and the classroom teacher. I just want you to visualize this, Jermaine, how intimidating it would be for a low-income, single, black female parent who has less than a college degree to walk into a room and there's 5 people sitting around a table. I mean, when you walk in, you feel like it's already been decided. Okay. The discussion has already taken place. So it's a very intimidating meeting.
So, and you know, I work in child welfare, and I don't know of a black boy that's in child welfare or that I've worked with who is not on an individual education plan. And that is concerning because when you think about, well, I know in 2012, the Bureau of Milwaukee Child Welfare's population, the majority of the families that they served in 2012, according to their annual report, was 68% of them were African American families. There's a huge or large number of black boys who are in foster care. Many of them present with a number of academic deficits as it relates to literacy, reading and reading comprehension, mathematics skills are pretty compromised. But being in the system does not typically help that child. You know, a lot of times they are worse off leaving the system, in my opinion, than they are than they were before they came into the system. So when we look at the number of the children that I work with, particularly who have academic deficits, majority of them are on individual education plans. Their parents may or may not be involved in their care plan. How do you suggest that we as a community, those of us who are foster parents, work with improving educational outcomes and advocating for these children, especially when it comes down to special education?
Well, now, I thought this interview was an hour because, Jermaine, the question you just asked is a 4-day workshop.
It's a well, we got to bring you in for a 5-day workshop. Then we need to bring you in for 5 days just to make sure. And you are coming December the 16th, so I want to put that out there.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, so we will be there December 16th. But let me just quickly say that, as you know, Jermaine, even white boys are placed in special ed more than white girls.
Yes.
So this problem transcends race. The root of this problem, Jermaine and Dr. Smith, as you know, is that in many cases we've designed a female classroom for large numbers of male students. And so if a teacher knows that boys have a higher energy level,
yes,
the solution should not be special education or Ritalin. The solution should be allowing more movement, more activity in the classroom. If you know that many of our boys are kinesthetic or tactile learners,
yes,
then either allow more movement or allow more objects in the classroom. Most teachers have not done that. Most teachers are still providing a left brain, sterile pedagogy to our students, where they're expecting boys of all races to sit still from 9 o'clock to 3 on ditto, working with ditto sheets and textbooks. So we could have a whole workshop just on, without even using black, white, male, female, our Milwaukee public schools meeting the needs of oral learners, kinesthetic learners, and tactile learners.
Okay.
Now, in terms of your original question as relates to foster parents, and you also connected that to reading, let me just say this. In the IEP, the research shows over 70% of the children who are placed in special ed are not there because of ADD or ADHD or LD.
Right.
They're there because they're behind in reading, which means the IEP should address the issues of literacy. And the fundamental issue for black children as it relates to literacy is that most black children have never fallen in love with literature.
Okay.
They have never been given a book that shows them as the primary characters. They've never read books for pleasure. Most black children will tell you that they read books because it's related to school, high-stakes testing. So we've created a program, Jermaine, titled Best Books for Boys and Best Books for Girls, and a children's library, where we've identified 260 of the best black books ever written for black children.
Okay.
So they can enjoy the experience. The three of us, I think the reason why Ramel is doing so well, why you're doing so well, Jermaine, is because all of us, when we were younger, fell in love with books.
Yes.
We love to read. In Milwaukee, many of our children have never had that experience. I think if we don't do anything else in the K-12 experience, we need to introduce black children to books that describe them, where they see themselves in the story, where they can't put the book down.
You know what? I 100% agree with that. And when we talk about reading literacy, getting them, we talk about a home run book. And a home run book is that first book that a kid gets that excites them, that turns them out to reading. And I can say without a doubt, when I was a young boy, I was 4 years old, my dad gave me a book on a man named Charles Drew. And reading this book about this guy who was an athlete in high school, became a doctor, did great things with blood plasma, and then died, ironically, because a white hospital would not admit him.
Right.
It had such a big mark on my life. And I remember that book even to this day as a 42-year-old, reading it as a 4-year-old. And that was the catalyst that got me excited about reading, but also wanting to do something at that point in time different for the system.
And, I would like to say, kudos to my mom in terms of literacy. I think the first independent living skill that she taught me that I can recall is the ability to read and to read with comprehension. And so that is very critical, I think, especially for all children, but particularly for children who are in the system's care and experience a lot of transition, moving from house to house, placement to placement, sometimes from county to county, community to community, that we have to give them a skill that's going to help them build and construct some decent lives and some lives that are worth living. So I agree with that. But, I want to go back to something that Dr. Kunjufu was saying as it relates to the American, not the public education system, but you're talking about
The IEP?
The IEP. Dr. Umar Johnson referred to the individual educational plan as the inferior educational plan. And so my question to you, Dr. Kunjufu, is do you think that special education placement or being labeled learning disabled, educable, mentally retarded, or at risk affects the self-esteem of black boys?
Well, again, I could answer that succinctly and say, yes, it does.
Yes.
But let me say this. When we look at Brown versus Topeka in 1954, we didn't have special education then. See, Thurgood Marshall naively thought that if we could simply go to school with white children, then all of our problems would be solved.
Yes.
He underestimated white supremacy and institutional racism because they created this new game called tracking, where you could literally have a school that's 50% white, 50% black on the outside, but highly segregated on the inside,
Wow.
where it's predominantly white and Asian for AP, honors, gifted and talented, and predominantly black and Hispanic for remedial and special education. So special ed did not even exist until 1975. So I agree with Umar, and he and I are friends, that it definitely is an inferior position. But let me go further. In my hometown, Chicago, with urban prep. Now, 6 years ago, we didn't have an urban prep in our poorest neighborhood, Inglewood. And we had a school, our only high school there was Harper High School, with a graduation rate of 35%. So the assumption is these are bad children. These are bad black male children. They need to be placed in special ed until we can transfer them to prison. We then create an urban prep, and literally 4 years later, the graduating class has 100% acceptance into four-year colleges.
Wow.
So, see, the assumption has always been there's something wrong with black children. No, the problem is there's been something wrong with the system, that if you place black boys, in this case, in an environment where they have, and by the way, at urban prep, not only is it a single-gender classroom, they also have almost 70% of their teachers are male. And they allow students, when they answer a question, to throw a ball into a garbage can. In other words, they don't have any problems with males standing up behind their desk while they're doing their work. They don't have any problems with males sitting on the floor while they're reading. They don't have any problems with boys walking around the classroom as long as they are on task.
Wow.
You know, and I guess one of the big things that I say about that is, too, I used to work in the prison here in Wisconsin, Racine Youthful Offender Correctional Facility, house young men 16 to 24. And these were a lot of the young men who had dropped out of school for various reasons. All were mislabeled, I should say. And the ironic part was that school had the highest HSED completion in the state. And what it was is a lot of the young men finally found out it's not that I'm not smart. It's just that, you know what, I didn't apply myself. I didn't have some of the focus that I had. And once they were in an institution where it was cool, where it was accepted to learn, you saw the ability. It was like it was a switch that they didn't even know was there. And once it was turned on, it was excellent. And I say all that to go back to the original point of the IEP, because Dr. Kunjufu, you had talked about this, that how intimidating it is for a parent to go into an IEP meeting. But what's even worse about it is, see, that's a legally binding document. And what most parents don't know is whatever is put in there for them to do, they must do. If not, they have broken a law and they can be sued. There can be litigation. But most parents don't know. What they do in special education is there's 3 years of a reevaluation and 1 year where they try to go back over the IEP to keep it current. But what most special education teachers do, unfortunately, they'll write the IEP, and that's basically where it stands. And most people don't follow up on it. There's always goals written that the person should reach this amount of proficiency. This person should improve this much, whether it's in reading literacy, reading comprehension, things of that nature. However, we don't see those improvements. And what makes the IEP a bad thing, because the IEP in itself is not bad. I think it's a great thing, but I think all students should have an IEP, because individualized education is something that we all should have. I think that's a part of a free and appropriate education, as Dr. Kunjufu talked about, being in a cookie cutter box specifically set out for female students. When everybody has an individualized education plan, that means you fit their specific needs, their specific strengths. However, in the inferior education plan that we do refer to as the individualized education plan, sadly, we have a lot of people who create a formula and they've just put it down on paper and it's not followed through. And unfortunately, a lot of our parents and a lot of our grandparents, because a lot of our children are coming in with grandparents and foster parents who don't have the time to follow up with that, and it falls through the crack. But unfortunately, it's far too many of us falling through the crack, creating a problem in our community, our village.
So, Dr. Kunjufu, do you think that the goal of special education is to at some point transition that child out of special education?
Well, that's the ideal goal. If you look at the research in terms of that, that's why I was going to raise the question: why do we define it or describe it as special?
Okay.
Do children go there for 1 to 4 years and return back to the mainstream classroom on grade level? Only 27% of children in terms of African American children who are placed in special ed return back to the mainstream classroom on grade level. As Ramel will tell you, Dr. Smith, that large numbers of African American children are reticent about returning back to the mainstream classroom, having been in special ed, because it's embarrassing to now be in 8th grade. You were placed in special ed for 3 or 4 years, so you were removed when you were in 4th grade. You're now in 8th grade, and you're 2 to 3 years behind in reading or math. You can't wait until your 16th birthday for you to drop out, because it's embarrassing.
And that goes back to your original point, because the conspiracy starts in the 3rd and 4th grade. You know, and you said that's where you're killing them before they grow. We talk about the book, but that was your work, Jawan. What you talk about?
I'm really disappointed about that, because when I wrote the conspiracy books and I talked about the 4th grade syndrome, I never knew that governors were going to pimp me like that and literally determine prison growth based on 3rd and 4th grade reading scores. My whole objective of writing that were that there were 3 critical grades: kindergarten, 4th grade, and 9th grade. And I felt the most important grade was 4th grade, when boys leave the nurturance of the primary division and move into the intermediate level. But governors, I mean, it's easier and cheaper to teach a boy how to read in 4th grade than to determine prison growth in 4th grade. I mean, if we look at Milwaukee, I don't know what the exact figures are, but nationwide it's between 18 and 38,000 a year. To spend that much money with a recidivism of 85%, it's simply not cost effective. It's cheaper to teach in Wisconsin boys how to read in 4th grade than to build new prisons.
And that goes back to your earlier saying of the word conspiracy. I know you don't want to use it, but when I say it, I think it's something more to it than what people would like to say. And I think when you talk about a capitalistic society, if it makes dollars, it makes sense. And so when you look at the powers that be, however they can make money, whether it's on the backs of people or whatnot, it's going to happen, because it's not a caring about a human being. And I take that all the way back to the Middle Passage, how they did our ancestors. And when you look at what they still call them, as they call them, slaves, well, we're the descendants of slaves. And if we're the descendants of slaves, really we have no more precious sight in their eyes than what our ancestors had in their ancestor eyes. And when they see us on a inferior level, they'll treat us that way.
I totally agree. You know, one of the things that Dr. Smith mentioned earlier when he described his experience working with inmates is that literally some of our best black minds are incarcerated. And when you were describing that, Dr. Smith, all I thought about was Malcolm X.
Yes.
And can you imagine how many Malcolms we have incarcerated who have such potential, and many of them will never be able, I mean, they may be able to develop it, but they may never be able to use it if they can't be released from incarceration.
So what I need to do is take a break, and we're going to come back in 3 minutes, and I would like to pick the conversation up talking about the special education to prison pipeline. And so we'll be right back. You are listening to Fresh Start Today. Our special guest is Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, and we also have Dr. Ramel Smith in the studio with us. We'll be right back.
Do you know someone in foster care? Have you been in foster care? Do you have a child in foster care? Are you a grandparent or relative caring for a family member? Are you considering becoming a foster parent? Then tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. to Fresh Start Today on WNOV 860 AM to engage in thought-provoking conversations with families and providers about child welfare services, both locally and nationally. Together, we can save our children.
We are back on air. This is Jermaine. This is Fresh Start Today, and our special guest today is Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. He's a national educational consultant and celebrated bestseller author of Raising Black Boys, Keeping Black Boys Out of Special Education, State of Emergency, We Must Save African American Males, just a number of books that he has written that have been a value to our community. So again, Dr. Kunjufu. Dr. Kunjufu? Dr. Kunjufu.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. I'm sorry about
Okay.
that. And we also have Dr. Ramel Smith. Right before the break, Dr. Ramel Smith and Dr. Kunjufu were talking about the pipeline, about incarceration and the number of African-American gifted men and women who are incarcerated. Some of our best minds are incarcerated. I need to tie this back to child welfare for a number of reasons. I think this all impacts child welfare, but some people may not think that. But in Cook County and also in Orange County, 80% of the inmates who were surveyed or interviewed indicated at some point in their life they were in foster care. A large percentage of the children who are currently in foster care present with academic challenges or deficits, impairments. Many of these children are in special education with an individual education plan, otherwise known as, or also known as, an IEP. So when we look at this, tying it back to not just foster care, but children in general, how many children or how many folks are incarcerated now in America? I think it's like 1.5 million, almost 2 million folks are in.
2 million.
Oh, it's over 2 million now. So that number
We're
has
2 million males.
2 million males.
Yes.
And what percentage of those children are, or those men are African American?
I'm sorry, what percent of the 2 million?
Yes, sir.
It's 50%.
50%.
Yes, sir.
That's a lot. That's a lot of black men and boys. Is that also including men who are under correctional? Let's just say probation, parole, juvenile detention.
No, as Dr. Smith described excellently, we're looking at 5 to 7 million when you add probation and parole.
So what do we need to do? What can we do to counter that? I mean, as parents, and I also want to make this point. We talk about educating and raising and caring for the black boys, but particularly in foster care and adoption, there are a number of transracial placements and adoptions. So what can we do to try to combat or counter our black boys from going into corrections?
Well, let me say this, because I definitely know all the many hats that you're wearing in this discussion, Jermaine. And as the commercial has mentioned, we need more people in Milwaukee to step up to the plate and become foster parents. And not to become foster parents for financial reasons,
right,
but because they want to make a difference in the lives of these children. Just like in Milwaukee, some of our children have been in a school for 4 years, and they've had 4 different principals in 4 years.
Wow.
There are students who've been in a school for 1 year, and they've had 4 to 5 different teachers in the same year. Well, that same experience is taking place in foster care, where you could have a child who is 12 years of age enter foster care at age 6 and has had 3 to 6 different foster parents.
Oh, a lot more, yeah.
So, one, we need foster parents. It's almost sort of, Dr. Smith sort of reminds me of Teach for America, where you can be part of Teach for America for 2 years and then walk away. Well, the same thing is happening in foster care. We need foster parents who really realize these children have a tremendous need, and what they need more than anything else is consistency and stability.
Yes, sir.
Now, beyond that, Jermaine, what we need after foster parents are able to stay in these children's lives for more than a year, we need to have a serious conversation between television time and study time.
Yes.
because that's the parallel. For example, whites on the SAT score 1582, and they watch 8 hours of television. African Americans score 1291, and we watch 38 hours of television.
Wow.
So whether it's a two-parent home or a single-parent home or a foster parent home, the million-dollar question becomes, are there any rules in your house surrounding television?
Wow.
You know, that's an excellent point. I tell my parents that all of the time, not only for sleep hygiene, because a lot of times kids will go to sleep with the television on, even when they're sleeping, not even giving their brain that natural activity to rest that they need. But when you start to talk about what becomes important, what becomes a value, it's about a educational stamina. And when you watch so much TV, then reading becomes very, very difficult for a person as far as sustaining. So what we want to do, and one of the things I liked about in reading Ben Carson's book, Gifted Hands, he talked about that same exact example with him struggling in school, his mom seeing that need, and turned off the television and required him and his brother to read a book and then to write reports on it. And I think that's
but
what we need.
Jermaine, wasn't Sonia Carson his mother? Wasn't she? Didn't she have her husband with her?
No.
Wait, I thought Sonia had a PhD.
No, not according to
I thought she was middle class.
No.
Wait a minute.
No,
I thought in order to raise a pediatric neurosurgeon, you had to be you had to be middle class. You had to be highly educated, and you had to have both parents in the home.
That's a myth. No.
That's a myth?
Yeah, it's a myth.
Oh, that's a myth.
You know, single parent.
So we're saying that a foster parent who stays with their children could do the same thing that Sonia Carson did with Ben Carson.
Amen.
Yes. And single parent moms, and, you know, whether birth, adoptive, or foster, that committed parents, stable parents, involved parents can produce Ben Carsons.
Yeah,
exactly.
I hate the term foster parents, because if you're a foster parent, you're a parent. I think the key word and the key ingredient is love. And once that kid has unconditional love, you see the unlimited potential unleashed like you can't imagine.
And I'm really glad you said that you don't like that term foster, because I have the same disdain about the word step. How can the man who stayed be called step, and the sperm donor is called daddy?
Yeah,
it's crazy.
The one who stays, the one who loves, who's consistent, who's nurturing, that's the parent.
So in terms of advice, because I know you're really busy, and we're gonna have to kind of bring the conversation to a close. We hate to, but it's just one of those things. But I want to make sure that the listening audience first know that we are honored to have Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu on the radio program today, discussing the impact of special education on black boys. But for those parents who are listening, you know, you mentioned increasing reading time while decreasing television, and video game time as well. That those are practical steps they can do to help improve the academic abilities of their children. Is there anything else? I particularly want to talk about the Wesher, the psychological evaluation tool that is used.
The West 5.
The Stanford Binet test. And I know something I was reading that you had published, Dr. Kunjufu, and you were saying that basically you're advising parents that, wait a minute, not to allow your children to take those tests. Why is that?
Well, because the tests are culturally biased.
Okay.
I mean, for example, what was Washington's first name?
George.
Well,
Frederick.
You know, in my book, it would be Harold or Booker T.
Right.
What color are bananas?
Mm-hmm.
In some neighborhoods, they're green or yellow.
Mm-hmm.
In some neighborhoods, they're dark brown.
Yeah.
I mean, the tests are culturally biased.
Wow.
That goes back to that Larry P. versus Riles case that I talked about, because they were putting children in special education based solely on these tests.
And can you imagine, Dr. Smith, if we had white children take Dr. Williams' black intelligence test?
Right.
Test of cultural homogeneity, and I'll just give you the acronym is the BITCH.
Exactly. Right. And can you imagine if we put white children in special ed if they failed that test?
Yeah.
But you also mentioned that if 80% of the students or white children that were in special education were males, that white America would declare a state of emergency. And I think that's interesting because when we talk about special education, the number of African American children who are in it, and equipping parents, whatever their colors are, if you're raising black children, to understand that there are special education, there are rights and responsibilities that parents have who are caring for these children, and that they do not have to take certain tests, and that they can request that the child takes a different test. And some of those tests you had mentioned in your book, Raising Black Boys, are the Black Intelligence Test that you just mentioned, the System of Multicultural Pluralistic Assessment, the Learning Potential Assessment Device, or the Kaufman Assessment.
Yes, and the other thing is that parents who don't feel comfortable in those meetings should ask someone like Dr. Smith to accompany them to those meetings, because, as he pointed out, it is a legal binding document.
Well, you know what, Dr. Smith, we're glad to have Dr. Smith here too, but Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, it has been a pleasure. I know how busy you are, and we probably could talk all day, but realistically we know we can't do that. And I'm looking...
Jermaine, can you tell the audience where I'm going to be on December 16th?
That's exactly what I'm going to do. That's exactly what I'm going to do. First, I want to say that you are the founder of African American Images, and they can go online to your website, AfricanAmericanImages.com, and they can purchase books and materials that are culturally relative to the African American experience, the African American child and family. So again,
if they go to the website, AfricanAmericanImages.com, and click on radio, there's a set of books, best books for boys, best books for teachers, for parents. It's 30% off, and it's free shipping.
That sounds great. Well, you know what? I can't wait for you to come on December the 16th. You're going to be doing a workshop, a 2-hour workshop, and we're going to be talking about raising black children, what we need to know, whether those children are institutional, whether those children are living with their birth families, adoptive families. What are some key points and strategies that folk who are raising and working with African-American children need to know? That's going to be at Fresh Start. If people would like to register for that workshop, it's at 6 o'clock p.m. on December the 16th. You can call 414-351-1100, 414-351-1100 to get more information about tips and strategies on raising black children. Again,
are you going to provide some snacks or something to eat?
We'll have something to drink, and we'll have some fruit and some healthy food.
Ramel, talk to your friend and tell him that if he wants more parents to be there.
Right now, I'm not going to say nothing about the health.
Kool-Aid may not be enough.
The Kool-Aid might not be enough.
Some wings and some chips, something else may be needed.
Yes, sir. Well, Dr. Kunjufu, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, to read your materials, and please keep us abreast of things that you are doing in African American Images.
Hey,
Thank you, Jermaine.
Can I just say one thing? Doc, you met me when I was a freshman in college, and I came up to you like so many people did, and you encouraged me so much, man. It's an honor to talk with you, and I want you to know that you greatly encouraged me to do what I do.
And look at what you're doing now. To God be the glory.
One love.
All right.
Take care. God bless.
Peace.
Hey, this is Jermaine from Fresh Start Family Services. Did you know the absence of a loving, nurturing father can wreck the lives of children? Unfortunately, millions of children and youth grow up without a healthy connection to their fathers for a number of reasons: abandonment, unemployment, incarceration, death, etc. When compared to other children, foster children are at greater risk of not being fathered. Fresh Start Family Services is looking for a few honorable single or married men to become licensed as foster parents. Research supports that children and youth in our community need one caring, supportive adult in their lives to take them from being at risk to at promise. Men, our future is in our hands. We can make a difference in the lives of young boys today. To learn more about how you can become licensed as a foster parent with Fresh Start Family Services, please call 414-351-1100. That is 414-351-1100. Foster the future. Foster a child.
860 AM, WNOV, Milwaukee.
And I know it's gonna be a lovely day.
Good afternoon. You're listening to the second half of Fresh Start Today. I'm your host, Jermaine Reed. In the studio, also, we have Dr. Ramel Smith. How you doing, Dr. Smith?
I'm doing great.
You're hanging in there?
Yes, sir.
That's great. The Madam Queen just walked in. Miss Wanda Montgomery. How you doing, Wanda?
I am just wonderful. I don't know about being the Madam Queen, but I am wonderful.
You know you running things around here. Everybody by all hail the Queen has walked in. So we're going to talk about Black Child Development Institute, Milwaukee. There's some big things that are happening. You all just released a report. So let's talk about that report. You have a big event coming up next week, and we want to make sure the public is informed. So what's going on with Black Child Development?
Well, as you said, we recently released a report. It was released on a national level last year from the national office. Being black is not a risk factor, and basically state of the black child. This was a report that was initially released back in the 70s and kind of gave the impetus for Black Child Development's work around the country. And it had kind of laid dormant for a while. And because of all of the things that are going on in our various communities and cities across the country where we have affiliates, they felt the need to revive this report from National Black Child Institute's perspective. So the national report was released last year in October. And then after that report, they asked that Wisconsin and Michigan do a similar report specific to their various communities. So we took on that charge back in January and started the work on looking at what areas of focus we wanted to address in our report. And so we worked on that with several people here in Milwaukee as well as the state, and released the report just a few weeks ago in Detroit at our national conference. And one thing that I should say, the title, when you say that, and I've said it in numerous groups, and people look at me like, you're crazy, right? We know that black kids are at risk, and so do I in a lot of instances. But, many of you just heard Dr. Alanja Kanjufu on the radio before I came on. And although we have our challenges and we may be at risk, we still have successes. We have kids that succeed in spite of the challenges that they have. They're resilient. And so this report really looks at a statistical as well as, and I'm losing my
No problem.
Statistical as well as a strength-based approach to what our kids are able to do. And so we've identified certain organizations in town that are doing the work, the grassroots. They're on the ground. They're doing it. They're making a difference. They're not the big organizations that get the big money, but they're the ones that are in the trenches. And I heard Dr. Kanjufu talk about Ben Carson's mother. She had a PhD. Well, we know she didn't, but she was smart enough to know what her child needed, and she was able to get both of her children where they needed to be. And they're successful, both of them. So I think, I had an opportunity in my life to have him come here to Milwaukee, him and his mother. And he presented at a banquet that we had. And you know where I met him initially? Where? At the National Black Child Development Conference. So, that they put us in touch with experts in a number of different arenas that we can draw from in terms of the work that we're doing here in this community. So, again, that report was released. It's a strengths-based approach to what is working well with our children.
Okay, so we are going to talk about this report in depth in terms of who are some of the contributors and some of the highlights from the reports. Now, going back to this report, being black is not a risk factor. Statistics and strength-based solutions from the state of Wisconsin. Tobika Green, she's the president of the National Black Child Development Institute, stated in her introduction that the essays and points of proof in Wisconsin report are not flashy. Mm-hmm. The work is not glamorous. It rarely gets funding in proportion to the accolades, but it's the type of work that moves the needle on outcomes for our black children and families. If this is the type of work that is critical to producing better outcomes for our children, what must we do as a community on a practical level to support these grassroots efforts? And one of the grassroots efforts is the Black Child Development Institute.
Well, we are grassroots because we are all volunteers. We have a board of directors that are all volunteers. We also have members who participate in some of the activities we have through their volunteer efforts. When we look at the contributors to this report and what Ms. Green was talking about, is that we have organizations and people who have a commitment to making a difference in the lives of our kids. And they start out a lot of times maybe with their own kids or specific areas in their neighborhood and their church and their community, and they build from there. And sometimes people start with one plan, and as they develop it, they realize that they are making a difference in kids' lives. Let me just give you one example in the report. We talk about Blanket of Love. Blanket of Love is a program that is housed at Ebenezer Church of God in Christ. It's a partnership with Columbia St. Mary's. Now, Columbia St. Mary's supports it. However, the work is done in the community. And what it is a program that meets with young expected moms on a weekly basis. And it's really to reduce infant mortality.
Is that visiting nurses?
It's not visiting nurses. It's what happens is, first of all, a lot of times what we need is people that we can trust.
Right. True.
It's about building relationships. True. And, if you begin to build relationships, it's just like what you were talking about earlier. In schools, kids will do things for teachers that they believe care about them, that they can trust. If you can't trust somebody, you may not give them or tell them everything that's really going on. But this program actually works with young moms to make sure that their babies get to their first birthday. This program has been in existence for 10 years, and I believe in the 10 years, and I don't know the exact number of participants, but I believe have had one death.
Wow.
That data, those statistics surpass probably any other program in the city of Milwaukee when we talk about making sure that these young moms have excellent prenatal care, that they have a smooth delivery, if that's what you want to call it, and that they care for their babies and get them through that first birthday. It's working. These young ladies have a support system within that program. And once you begin to develop those relationships, then you can connect them to other resources and to other people that can help them build their lives and really become contributing members of society. So that's one program that is highlighted in this report. They do have, when they meet on a weekly basis, they have training for these young moms. They come around, like Dr. Kanjufu told you, at your training in December. Make sure you have some food for folks to eat, not Kool-Aid and cookies. And so these moms come, they have a full meal, and then they also help them with parenting skills, things that you need to do, and then they learn from each other. So it is about building relationships. So that's just one of the points of proof that is in this report. The report has so-called experts that have contributed essays around particular topics. But then we wanted to go one further. We wanted to know, we know what the experts say about the data, but we wanted to know the boots on the ground, what's actually happening, and how we can highlight those programs.
Who are some of those contributors to the report?
Well, Blanket of Love, that's led by Julia Means, who's a registered nurse. Another contributor is Dalvery Blackwell, who's executive director of African American Breastfeeding Network. She also had an opportunity to go with us down to Detroit, and she was able to present at the national conference on what she does in her program. And she not only looks at the moms with breastfeeding, but how dads and significant others can support the family around breastfeeding, and that breastfed babies are healthier babies.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit because I did some research on. I learned a lot about breastfed babies, and I may have been a breastfed baby. I don't know, but I learned some additional information. It's going to be interesting.
I was just going to say this was the thing. I remember when Ms. Montgomery first gave me this book. I had my 10-year-old daughter with me.
All right.
And we read it together. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the first articles that she got. So when you talk about what this program does, I think we had to look not only at the young ladies that it's impacting, but the other subsidiary when you think about the trickle-down effect from who they may teach, but the other people who just learn about it. Because my 10-year-old daughter, who's nowhere near, thinking about that, is now ingrained in her mind as far as what are the positive things. So it's sort of like when your mom tells you you're going to college and you don't even know that that's an option. Now she's thinking about breastfeeding, understanding the health benefits, so that's something that she knows to do. So I think that's another great aspect of the book, how it helps people who you didn't even know was intended to help initially.
Absolutely.
Family Finding was another point of proof that was.
Family Finding is a program that is housed at Children's Hospital of Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And what that program does is children that come into care, foster care, what children as well as others have realized that if kids can't be with their biological parent, their mom and their dad, and maybe that family that's connected to the mom and dad, are there other relatives either locally or beyond that those kids can be connected to? And so Family Finding actually goes through a process of almost like mapping for a child. So you look at the child in the center, and then you look at their parents and who's related to their parents, and who's out there that might be a good support for that child. Now, they may not be the placement for them, but they might be able to support whatever the placement is. And we know, I come from a family of 9 children, and family to me is important. I don't know if I didn't have my family where I would be. Right. And I can tell you, I had 2 brothers that live out of state, and one was here for the weekend. And so our family got together for potluck. And now we have, the next generation coming up. So I got a lot of nieces and nephews who are adults. And the first thing they said is, we need to get together on a regular basis. So now they want to have the first Sunday potluck as a family. Now, we hosted at my house on Sunday, and I had 40 people. And they want to come for Thanksgiving now, so it's like
I was family.
If you are, I got a whole lot of extended family, but when you get to the bare minimum of who I'm talking about, we got at least 50 to 60 people from my siblings and their kids alone and grandkids.
So finding family and being connected to family is really critical for the emotional development, mental development, academic development, spiritual development of individuals.
Yes.
And so this program, Family Finding Project through Children's Hospital, so that was featured in. But what about the, I forget what it's called, the, I forget it, Young Star program. There's something about Young Star.
Yes. So let me just say this. The 3 areas of focus that we had in the report was strong families, health, and quality early care and education. And so we looked at the Young Star program, which is the state's program on rating child care centers. And it's just like when you go to a hotel or a restaurant, and if you're online looking and they have a rating, and they may tell you, well, this restaurant is 5-star. Well, if it's 5-star, it's going to cost you more. And some of it, the ratings, each star tells you if the first star is $10 to $15, the second star is, on up. So that's really kind of how Young Star is. It ranks child care programs in the state of Wisconsin based on the educational level of the staff, the policies and procedures they have, the physical location, certainly the experience of their staff and their programs that might be for infant toddlers, family programs, group programs. And so we identified 2 programs in the city that were highlighted. One was a family program, and the other is a group. Now, you have to go through assessment every year to maintain your rating, just like you would anything else. So you don't just get the 5-star and stay there. You get analyzed or assessed every year. And so the family program we had is, and you know I'm going to mess up the name, it is Child Development Enrichment Center. And the director over there is Glenda Haynes. She is one of a limited number of family programs in Milwaukee that have a 5-star rating. Not only does she have it, she continues to get reassessed. And I don't know if Glenda's listening, but she got a waiting list. She does some phenomenal things with the children in her program. And really, if you talk to Glenda, what you find with her is she has a passion for working with our children, and she don't take no excuses. All kids can learn.
Well, you know, if Glenda's listening or someone knows Glenda is listening, if they can let her know to call me over at Fresh Start, because I would like to talk with her, because Young Star was a big change in terms of how child welfare services were not child welfare, but child care services are delivered in the state of Wisconsin. And so she has a 5-star, and she's been able to retain that or become reassessed. And we would definitely like to get her on the show, because perhaps she provides consultation to other daycare providers in terms of what programs she offers, what her strategy is, and so that's going to help community. And then also too, I definitely want to get you all talk about the child care at some point, because I would like to know, particularly dealing with the child welfare community, foster care, you know, that our children present with some unique needs, a unique set of needs. And a lot of times we will see a lot of daycare disruptions, placement disruptions, in addition to home disruptions, you know. And what can we do, or what is being done to kind of create an environment that is responsive to the needs to foster children? So that's just that point when you brought that up. But we're going to take a break, and we're going to be back, and you can join this conversation. As we discuss, the State of the Black Child is a report that was just released by the Black Child Development Institute in Milwaukee, and you can call us at 414-444-5250.
When I wake up in
Okay, we're back in the studio. This is Fresh Start Today. I'm your host, Jermaine Reed, and we have Dr. Ramel Smith and Wanda Montgomery from the Black Child Development Institute. She's the president of the Black Child Development Institute in the studio. And we're talking about the State of the Black Child report that was released recently. And so your report, Wanda, the report had 3 focus areas. You mentioned strong families, health, and quality early education. We just got finished talking about Young Star. How critical is early child development or education for African American children?
It's critical. It's critical for all children, because it is
right
next to their home. You know, we don't wait till kids go to a child care program before we start teaching them. They should start that in their homes. You know, when we talk about literacy, and Dr. Kanjufu talked about it earlier, making sure that our kids have books they enjoy reading or books about themselves. Well, it goes even beyond that.
Okay.
Parents should be reading
to their children
even before they come here.
Yeah. Right.
They should be reading. Just like you would read to your child that's 1 or 2 years old, you can take some time and read to the child while it's yet in the womb. So it's exposure, it's the environment in which our children are in, but it is a quality early care and education experience is critical to success of our children. We know that, there are programs that have been identified for many years, quality early care and education, Head Start programs, which really support educational excellence of our kids. Now, sometimes our children can be in a program that's excellent, but they don't stay in that program.
Okay.
And it's just like anything, consistency and working up that ladder is going to help you to retain and to build on what you learn. Now, if you're in a child care program, even if it's quality, but you're switching, going to a different program every 5 to 6 weeks, you're going to have some challenges. It's like anything else. Kids need to be able to build strong, trusting relationships. You can't do that if you're moving from program to program. You can't do that if you're moving from school to school. I think it was Dr. Kanjufu or it might have been Dr. Smith who talked about kids being in schools where they got 4 different teachers in 1 year, or being in a school for 4 years and a different principal every year. Each time that change happens, there's going to be an adjustment in that child's life.
Well, let me say this. 18%, black children make up 18% of the preschool population, but they make up 48% of those individuals who are expelled or suspended from preschool. So when we talk about preschool, are we talking about early education? Are we talking about K4, K5? We're talking about child care. When you talk about preschool, we're talking about before first grade.
Absolutely. So
okay.
It's
all of that, all the above. So if they're making up 48% of the population of children being suspended, is suspension expelling children from preschool environments in the child's best interest? And when we think long term?
No. And first of all, I guess you have to identify why they're being suspended. Is it because, some schools are so legalistic in what their process is. If you
tolerance.
Absolutely. If you get out of your chair, you're going to get a point. And if you go talk to somebody, you're going to get another, not a point, but a check. And you earn 3 checks, you go into the principal's office. If you go to the principal's office 2 or 3 times, you're going to get suspended. Well, tell me, how many 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds do you know that just gonna sit? Tell me how many 21 and 30-year-olds that just gonna sit in a class. It doesn't happen. That's not our nature. Our nature really is to be social. And so for teachers, they really need to look at how can I support that behavior and really help kids develop. Some of the challenges we have now is that kids don't know how to socialize with each other. Okay. And so they end up, they can't talk through nothing. If you don't do what I say, it's a fight, and, that's it. So it's really helping at an early age establish certain norms with kids that they know how to behave in certain environments. But I have grandchildren. And they come to my house. If I expect for them to sit in one seat and stay there for the whole time they're there, that's not going to happen.
Right.
Sometimes what happens, they're not even in school a month before they're getting suspended because the teacher has low tolerance for, maybe they're dealing with the class from the year before. I'm not going to deal with this no matter what. If it happens, that's it. I can tell you our grandson, who's now 7, had an experience in the school he was in. Within a month, his teacher had identified him as needing special ed. And his parents were like, what? We don't understand this. Well, in order for me not to go to the school and have a name for myself, I contacted a resource who's my daughter, who's a PhD in education, and told her what was going on. She was able to communicate with the school, give them some specific ideals, ask the right questions, tell them this, that, and the other. And you know what we learned? We learned that the teacher and our grandson, it wasn't a good fit. So the next semester, we moved him into another classroom. Totally different type of reaction and response to that teacher.
And I think that's really important, especially as it relates to special education. I know there was that advocacy piece that your grandson was fortunate to have these individuals that really protected him. And I use that word intentionally when I say protected him.
From being labeled.
But for those individuals whose children actually go into special education, if this is the beginning of a new school year, it's important that I think that parents stress that we need to start from scratch, because maybe last year was not a good fit between the child and whoever was educating that child at the particular time, and not have that carryover effect, but give them a new slate, a fresh start.
Well, no, I was just going to say one of the unfortunate things is that when you talk about that male-female dynamic in the classroom, specifically white female to black male, you don't always have that type of ability to switch and whatnot. I think what we have to do when we talk about early developmental centers is those who are trained, they need to be adequately trained to deal with that as they come in. You shouldn't need someone's aunt to come in and teach you something that you were supposed to be trained to know. So there's some things we can do on the front end to prevent these things from happening, because we talk about labeling. I call it abuse, because really what that is when you have a mismatch of teacher learning styles and a child's learning style, that's one thing. But when you have a teacher who in less than a month has already labeled this kid and categorized him, if that kid is forced to be in the room, I've heard teachers say, well, I don't have to like him, he doesn't have to like me, we have the year to go over with, and then that's a wasted year. You get 2 consecutive wasted years, and that's when you get that 4th grade syndrome that Dr. Kinjufu was talking about.
Is that what you call that misdiagnosing of children?
Well, I think that's true, but keep in mind, you have people diagnosing kids with certain behaviors that aren't equipped to diagnose.
Right, true. And that's the issue.
100%.
Right. And so we have to be careful, and parents need to know, if you get a teacher or even a principal that says that, you can go in and say, well, I want to have my own independent assessment done. Don't just take the word of somebody telling you that. A lot of times we know our children better than anybody else, but we may not be able to articulate it in a way to hopefully help them understand where we're coming from. But adults don't get to be where they are ADHD, because we do have adults that are ADHD.
I might have a little.
They didn't get there by it just happening overnight.
Right. But you know what, even the thing with ADHD, and me and Jermaine kind of laugh about that, I have some of that. But what I do is I've learned how to use what people consider a deficit and to figure out as a strength. If I'm a hyper person, what can I do in my life where that hyperness becomes a positive trait? And when we talk about our students, it's not about if our children are smart. All children are smart.
Right.
What teachers have to be adequately keen in doing is to find out how they are smart, and then finding that way to them. Again, what Dr. Kinjufu
That's a
talked
learning
about.
style.
If we do a cookie cutter approach where we say everybody fits into this mold, and if you don't fit into this mold, then there's something's wrong with you. We have a deficit thing where we have to learn that just because it's a difference, it's not a deficit, and that's what we've got into the whole part of coming into, and that's why we have a lot of the misdiagnosing, the mislabeling, the misassessment, and then mistreatment with our children. It's not that there's a deficit, it's just that they're different, and when the teacher's not adequately, properly prepared to deal with it, the quickest thing to say is, it's not me, it's them, let's move them, they're the problem.
Right. And one thing, as I look at our report, something that Ms. Haynes had in her assessment of what they do, she said, we have strong, respectful, and trusting relationships with the children in our program.
Wow.
And equally as important, with their families.
Yes.
And so even if a family has deficits, she builds the relationships not only with the children, but also with those families. So, it's the commitment to say, I'm going to make a difference in this child's life. So when they leave here, and she said it, they've gone to schools where they are well above anybody else in their class. And so then the challenge becomes for that teacher, what are you going to do to keep this child challenged and interested?
Right. And so when the environment is less challenging, then our children have a tendency to
do other things.
It's not just children, it's adults.
Adults as well. Well, we're going to take a break, and you can join this conversation, those who are listening, by calling 414-444-5250, and you can tweet us at FreshStart860 or email us at freshstart860@gmail.com. We'll be right back after this break.
Do you know someone in foster care? Have you been in foster care? Do you have a child in foster care? Are you a grandparent or relative caring for a family member? Are you considering becoming a foster parent? Then tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. to Fresh Start Today on WNOV 860 AM to engage in thought-provoking conversations with families and providers about child welfare services, both locally and nationally. Together, we can save our children.
860 AM, WNOV, Milwaukee.
Bears heavy on my mind.
So we're back in the studio. This is Jermaine Reed. I'm your host for Fresh Start today. I have with me today Dr. Ramel Smith and Wanda Montgomery. Wanda is from the Black Child Development Institute Milwaukee. She is the president of the local chapter. And we're talking about their strength-based report entitled Being Black is Not a Risk Factor, the State of the Black Child. And so we were talking about daycare and early child care settings being stimulating environments that are going to foster and encourage growth. And we gave some statistics, but recently the U.S. Department of Education reported data on preschool discipline. And so the question that I have is, do you think, Wanda and or Dr. Smith, that there's a correlation between preschool suspension and delinquent behavior later in life, including adult incarceration?
I think it depends on if it's ongoing. I mean, if you have a child that gets suspended in preschool and then it's first grade and second grade, I mean, it's just a cycle. And maybe there is a behavioral problem or issue that's not being addressed. I think it can lead into that. But in preschool, well, first of all, I don't know too many preschools that suspend kids. Now, they may have a conference with the parent, and typically what happens is if there are concerns around behavior, they may not suspend them. They may just say maybe that program is not a good fit for that child, and then ask the parent to look for another option. Now, school programs may be totally different. And again, there's usually criteria that says if kids do this, and this, these are grounds for suspension. I remember when I was in my master's program, I had to do internship at a school. And I think my first day there, I was in a classroom and a child came up to me and asked if I would give him a 72. And I would say, what is a 72? And basically it was a slip for him to go to the office. So he already had it, he figured that I was the disciplinarian. He already had it in his head. It gives them an out. You don't have to be in the classroom if you can go sit in the office.
And I think, unfortunately, too, it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, this is what's the norm for me. This is what I'm supposed to do. So you talk about that prisoner pipeline. That's exactly what it is. When you get numerous suspensions, 72s, detentions, expulsions, things of that nature, that leads to more criminal-type behavior as you get older. So, unfortunately, I think it does lead to it, and I think that's something that our teachers have to be very aware of the precedent that they're setting for the kids, the tone that they're setting. There has to be another way to discipline without it being punitive. The end point of a punishment or discipline should be to improve a behavior. But if the punishment does not improve the behavior, you have to know that that's ineffective and something else needs to be done.
Absolutely.
Dr. Billings, Latson Billings, she wrote in your report that suspensions tend to exacerbate problem behaviors. Do you think there's a link between preschool suspension and school performance? And if so, how?
Well, if you're suspended, you're not in school.
Right.
And if you're not in school, you're not learning. And if you're not learning, yes, it's going to be a problem. I mean, it's like anything. You get better when you're doing things on an ongoing basis. The more you read, the better you become, not only at reading, but comprehending and writing. If you're not in school where that may be your only opportunity, because some of our kids don't, somebody said it earlier, they may not have books. So they read in school. When they get home, they may not have access to it. So if you don't have it, you're not going to be able to improve on your skill level if you're not doing it on a regular basis. So certainly if you're not in school, if you're suspended for 3 days and you just sitting at home watching TV, you're going to learn something, but it ain't going to be what's going to help you to move to the next level.
And when you get back to the classroom, you're behind on top of that. So that makes it even more frustrating. We talked about that acting out to remove yourself from that position that's not comfortable.
So let's talk about foster children who come into care. Many of them, as I stated earlier when we were talking with Dr. Kunjufu, I'm hungry, Kunjufu, we were talking with him, and I had mentioned that in regards to the number of kids coming to foster care, a lot of them have academic deficits, impairments, and many of them are functioning 2 and 3 grade levels behind. And this is before they come into care. And I think that's really important to stress because that speaks to what we need to do, I think, as a community to enhance early education experiences for our children. But many of them are coming into care and they are functioning 2 and 3 grade placements below. What do you think needs to happen in terms of policies and practices to ensure that all children coming into care receive the best educational support?
Well, there are a couple of things with this. A lot of the reasons that kids in care, before they get in care and they are already behind, as well as I do, that most kids that are in the foster care system is not due to significant physical or sexual abuse. It's due to neglect.
Right.
And neglect a lot of times comes when they're not getting their needs met. And it could be that the families are challenged, they're moving a lot. So that causes disruption in going to school. Maybe the parents have some substance abuse, or they might be incarcerated or for limited periods, and maybe the kids go with a family member and they're not near their school. I mean, there are a lot of things that come into play that could be the reasons that kids are behind. For a number of years, I worked in the child welfare system, and one of the things that I talked about, and I know there's been some conversations, how do we stabilize kids' experience?
Okay.
Just because you're going to different foster homes, can we keep you in the same school?
Yeah.
Can we keep you in the same child care? At least you have that
Some
relationship. Because,
continuity, yeah.
When you're moving from your home, that's already a trauma situation. But if you have a relationship with a child care program, is it possible to keep you in that program? If you're already in a school, is it possible to keep you in that particular school? So it's really working toward a holistic approach to say, when we remove this child, we're going to look at the full scope. It's just like anyone, as we become adults and we change jobs. When we change jobs, most people don't change where they live. It may just take them a little bit longer to get to work. So
Amen.
we really need to look at, as we talk about stabilizing children's experiences, whether it's in the early care and education program or in their school setting, how do we look at, is it providing additional transportation to get them there?
Okay.
Or is it looking at really trying to find a foster family or a relative that's closer to where they are? Because anybody knows every time you switch a school, a job, a church, a neighborhood, it's an adjustment. Some people adjust quick.
And you
Some
lose something
people-
in that process.
Absolutely.
When I worked at Children's Hospital, one of the great things that I had the ability to do was to be a connector. Most of the time, the social worker would say, hey, she's been seen or he's been seen, Dr. Smith, please continue that. And then I could let the new family know what were some of the things that happened before. I could connect with the school if it was a new school or the old school, some of those things. So having, like you said, some type of person who's there consistently that has the ability to connect all of those other things, I think is paramount.
I want to kind of go back to something. I was looking up some information regarding suspensions and its impact on educational outcomes for children, and particularly dropout. And it's something I want to read to you. I researched this some time ago, but chronically suspending children is not rehabilitative. In fact, there's volumes of research and data that suspending children puts them on an accelerated track to falling behind in school, dropping out in school, involvement in the juvenile justice system, and later adult incarceration. For the particular child that I was caring for at that particular time, I kind of informed his team that both national and local data show that black boys are suspended out of school at a much higher rate than their counterparts or peers. School district zero tolerance behavioral policy has had some long-term damaging effects on disabled children, black children, and poor children. And so we really have to become strong advocates for trying to work with children in these settings versus using expulsion as a behavior modification order.
Corporal punishment and the horrendous nature of what you do to a child with that. But some of the things we do is just as abusive to children with that. And I think sometimes when you have that emotional and that mental component, it makes it even worse for a child, because that's supposed to be a system, that's supposed to be a safety net, that's supposed to help. So sometimes we look at abuse, but we look at it in a very tangible way instead of looking at some of the other ways in which the system itself is abusing. And as we talked about before, when you have this continual rate of a way of discipline and punishment, but it's not shown to be effective, and we continue to use it, we have to ask ourselves the big question, then why?
Absolutely.
So let's switch tracks here and talk a little bit. I want to go back to talking about the African American Breastfeeding Network. And Wanda, you started off the program referencing this as one of the highlights in the reports, and it was interesting because I think in general I knew that breastfeeding was healthier, but do we know why breastfeeding is more healthier for children? I guess it's some enzymes or something in the milk that just...
Human milk is always better than cow milk.
Right.
Well,
Because you don't have, I mean, it's coming directly from the mom. It's not only the milk, but it's also that bonding.
Okay.
It's that relationship, having the baby close to you. You know, you've carried this child for 9 months inside of you. So it's traumatic. The birth is usually a traumatic. That's why babies come out screaming. So it provides that opportunity to really keep the baby near you, and really parents or moms are looking at what they're eating to make sure it's nourishing to the baby, but and it helps to decrease some of the illnesses that kids might get.
Right.
Strengthens the immune system.
Right. Right.
Well, you know, and that's interesting because you bring up the bonding piece, and because I work with foster care and this program is connected to foster care, you know, I think about that whole bonding piece and the number of children who come into care as infants and how that's
separation.
It's disrupted. That process is disrupted, and it's very traumatic, you know, and I think that is why we have to really work together as a community, just bearing all of our resources to support families so children don't have to come into care.
And it's not only emotionally traumatizing, neurologically, it has impact on the brain that can have life-lasting implications.
Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Well, the brain is developed between the ages of 0 and 4. 90% of your brain is developed, and the brain grows upwardly. It goes. So you talk about your brainstem. What that is the base. So you think about a wet cement. That's the part that hardens first. So those are all the things that deal with your attachment. You think about a baby. We say this baby is just a baby. It doesn't know. But you take a baby out of the arms of the mom or the primary caregiver into a stranger. What does that baby do right away? It lets you know, this is not where I want to be. When the baby doesn't have that ability to trust someone to be a primary caregiver, it has a detrimental effect on every other person who acts as a primary or secondary caregiver, because the key word again is trust, attachment, stability, and consistency. They haven't been known to have that. So what happens? You become protective in your future. You become defensive. You become emotionally numb and an inability to attach. So when we talk about what problem does that have? When a kid is born premature, they have something called kangaroo care. And because the baby should still be in the womb attaching to the mom, they literally put the baby on the mom so they can feel that warmth, the heartbeat, and everything there, because it's a closeness, it's attachment that bond is supposed to have. Now, you take that away from an infant, you take that away from a toddler, what do you think they're going to have? So that's when you get a teacher who's in K-5 and said, listen, I've given this kid all the love I possibly could, and he doesn't respond. And they're blaming the child for something that they can't even control. It's like, how can I trust you when I haven't been able to trust the people I was supposed to trust initially?
Yeah, and I think the other thing in terms of the breastfeeding aspect is part of the reason we highlighted this is to encourage young moms to, or any mom, to really look at breastfeeding as an option. It's cost effective too. You're not buying formula.
Right.
But
look at hospitals. A lot of times, what I've read was that hospitals in poor communities, that hospitals will send mothers home with formula. That is not really the importance of breastfeeding is not stressed, and that somewhat contributes to why the numbers are so much low. Go ahead.
They get you out so quick.
Right.
And that's the thing. To make sure you have something is better than nothing. And not every mom is going to be able to breastfeed.
I'm going to ask you, can all women breastfeed?
Well,
I mean, I'm sorry, but
there's some that have challenges.
Like, do their body naturally produce milk?
The
That's what
body
it
will
does.
produce the milk, but
And can
sometimes
they get a machine?
attachment. And then sometimes, I mean, too, you got to think you have postpartum depression,
Right.
And
So
then when
there's
you have a
situation,
mom
right.
where you have that, and that's not even the kind of milk you want. And getting
Right.
back to your point of
Being
breastfeeding,
stressed.
I think it makes the mom be more aware of her things, what she's doing, because she know the body is dependent on her. But not every mom can breastfeed.
And I think the other thing is there's nothing wrong with breastfeeding. I think we've gotten away from it because people don't, I can't feed my baby out in public and I can't do this. So sometimes it becomes a challenge for people to be able to do it, and they don't want to. It's easier to pack up a bunch of bottles, just like it's easier to pack up a bunch of Pampers and not use regular diapers. So there are things that ways that the African American Breastfeeding Network is really working with families to encourage them.
Because when we think from a historical standpoint, when African American women came here, African at the time, they breastfed
their body
Yes.
babies.
and they were wet nurses
Right.
for their
That
masters.
was just- that's the point I was about to
so
make,
are we
yes.
going back to that because that was natural?
Well, I don't know if we're going back to being wet nurses,
I don't want you-
but we may be going,
Going
back
to feeding our own.
Right.
Because there's some value in that,
Absolutely.
and not just giving milk, but bonding and some of these other attachments.
And
we
there are
talked
a lot of organizations, agencies, and businesses that even have an area set up for moms to
So they have to be,
breastfeed.
breastfeed
So they
friendly.
support.
That's
Right.
good. That's great. That's
Right.
great. Well, I want to make a couple announcements. Wanda, tell us about the 2014 Community Awareness Recognition Banquet that BCTI is having.
We will be celebrating our 8th annual Recognition and Community Service Banquet on Thursday, November 13th at the Hilton Garden Inn with a reception at 5:30, the dinner at 6:30. And this is an opportunity for us to recognize people in our community who've been nominated for this award. And we will also be recognizing the contributors in the report that did points of proof. So, if people want to attend.
What does it cost for tickets?
The tickets are $70. However, if you are a child care provider or work for a child care center, you can get a ticket at $25. We have some sponsorship. You can go on our website at www.bcdi-milwaukee.org to pay for a ticket, or you can stop by our offices, and all of that information is on the website.
All right. And just want to remind our listeners that November is National Adoption Awareness Month. Fresh Start has a training presented by the Milwaukee Health Department. Topic is Safe Sleep, and that's going to be from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. So all foster parents who are caring for children who are under the age of 12 months will need to participate in that training. Also want to extend an invitation to those who are listening to this broadcast that if you are interested in becoming a quality foster parent, a foster parent that's really concerned about the well-being of children, we're inviting you to come to a foster care informational session and recruitment fair on November the 15th. And you have to pre-register by November the 10th. You can call 414-351-1100. Again, that's for foster care information session and recruitment fair. We also want to announce that we're about to go off the air. I think that's what's left. So it's been great talking with you all. Next week we will have we're going to have part 2 of the Black Male Child series, and we're going to be talking about black boys overdiagnosed with ADHD. Is it biology, culture, or racism? So tune in next week. And we'll also have in the studio, I believe we have coming who is our guest for next week? Well, you're going to have to stay tuned and we'll let you know. Or you can go on our website at Fresh Start Today, on Facebook, Fresh Start Today, and you can find all that information out. Thanks a lot and have a great day.
Bears heavy on my mind.